All right, so thank you guys again for listening. So this week, me and Justin are going to talk about coolers slash freezers and all walk-ins of the sort. We're going to talk about stuff about each of those.
Yes, we are. Clayton's going to lead it off. So if you want to start,
Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is how to clean coils. Okay, and this is pretty standard across the board for all warehouses, grocery stores, all that stuff. How to clean coils. Okay, first thing, just like we talked on a few other things, there's two ways to clean walk-in coils: correctly or fast. There is no in between. Okay. Now, there is times when you're going to come across walk-in coils that you might have to brush off, clear the drain out before you come back. But if at all possible, schedule with the store, talk with the manager, whoever, to be able to clean these coils and clean them properly. Because if you clean them properly, you're going to get months out of them versus brushing them and maybe getting a day or two.
and a lot of this is a big thing, guys. So obviously, your high traffic walk-ins are going to get dirtier first. Your dairy cooler is your number one target, right? Dairy cooler, produce cooler. Those are going to get trashed the most first because if you really think about it, your walk-in freezers, it's going to take quite some time for those to get dirty. The reason why, because it's not as much traffic going in and out of there as say a dairy cooler, right?
Absolutely.
But
And
what he's talking about is like at a lot of the stores we work at, they'll let the coils get caked up with this much dirt on the back of the evap before anyone says anything about it. And the only reason it came up is because there's water leaking all over the floor. So just don't let it get that bad. It'll
absolutely.
help you out a lot.
Yeah. And also with cleaning these, right? When you clean them, right? We'll talk about how to clean them, right? And before we do that, we should talk about how to prep to clean the pans and the coils, right? Preparation is a big thing. Obviously, you're going to have to prep by talking to the managers. Communication is key. You don't just show up, drag a water hose in there, and start spraying. All right. That is not going to work. You can do it once. You can really do anything once, but it's not a good choice. So you got to prep. You got to talk to the managers. You got to explain to them what you're doing. And I'll tell you, it is very frustrating for them for you to have to clean coils. But if you at least talk to them, even bad news told to them rather than them finding out themselves is a lot better than you just going in and full sending it with a water hose. So how to prep, for
Yes.
instance, like a dairy cooler, non-shop-in dairy cooler is what we're talking about. Okay. Standard dairy cooler. It's about 50-50 where the EVAPs are. A lot of them in the older stores are right over top of the shelves, actually, right? So that's nice, right over top of where the shelves are. What we like to do is have them pull the top shelf, and this is key. This is so key. Have them, I always recommend they pull it all, but if they won't and they only want to pull the top, have them cover it, right? If you put it
Because
on
then you're
them,
liable.
yes. If
If
they
you do it,
cover it,
you're liable.
yes, absolutely.
So, and make sure that it is tarped. If they don't do it, you make it known that you tried to have them do it and you are going to do it, and anything can and will get wet, right?
Yep. And something we do,
Just so they
every one of our guys use apps, time and date stamp and GPS location apps. That will save every time, right? They won't
yeah.
pull it, time and date stamp. You ask them
Yep.
again, time and date stamp. Then you tarp it, time and date stamp. And I'll tell you, if you can do that, it makes life so much better. And it helps
Mm-hmm.
me when Justin and them, when they say, hey, a manager brought this up, man, when I can pull up the work order history and have 100 time and date stamp photos from like 12 angles, that is like paint to push them right in the corner. So always make sure to do that, and
Cover
then,
your tracks.
yes, cover your track. So obviously you're prepping it, have them cover that. And listen, you can try if you want just to start washing the big chunks right down the drain, let the drain clog up 500 times. I wouldn't recommend that. After you get it all covered,
Just
the
an
first,
extra hand.
yeah. But before you even do that, we're going to want to get that main trunk line cleared, okay? Because, dude, it's like a 2.5 inch pipe in there. The last thing you want to do is let that be clogged, okay? And a little hack for that, it depends on the customer. Some people are okay with it. If you're there a day earlier and you're prepping for the next day, all right, and you can dump some kind of cleaner in the very far end, not drain cleaner, but a little bit of bleach or something in the far end. Oh, the next day it'll eat most of that up, right? But if you can't, make sure to
I
get
have
that.
actually a story about that,
Go ahead.
about exactly what he's talking about. Every time now, because we've gotten smart with these cleanings, Clayton will send a person out the day before just to make sure that that trunk line is cleaned out. Because one time we were doing a cleaning, and it was a freezer, and then it's the cooler, and then it's the store, right? So we were cleaning the freezer. So the freezer drain line goes through the cooler, and then it goes into the store. Well, the freezer and the cooler are on the same drain line, right? Well, little did we know we were cleaning out the freezer, and then we walked out to go get some cleaner for the for the evap, and there's water rushing all over the cooler floor because the cooler drain line was clogged, and the
Hmm.
freezer connects to the cooler, which connects outside of both of them. So just make sure that whole line is clear before you start rinsing, because you don't
Yes.
want to make a mess all over a freezer or a cooler. Really, you don't want to make a mess anywhere. So make sure that's clear.
And it's so worth it. And listen, there is costs that comes up with that, right? With clients and all. But they may complain a little bit, but it'll be worth it rather than you just trying to, full send it and make a mess. So you want to clean that main trunk line out. Once you get that trunk line cleaned out, I think it's great if you can get a vacuum with a brush or something, get all the big chunks off, right? Then drop that pan, take that pan outside if possible. It's not always possible. Take that pan outside, spray it down with some cleaner. You're gonna Justin's seen it, I've seen it where you get a freaking paint scraper and scrape it out. Okay, get all them chunks out of there. And then, like I say, if you have the tarps and all down and you could start washing them coils out, right? Let's get them washed. Some dairy coolers and produce coolers have drains in the middle of the floor or over near the door, right? So I always like to have at least definitely two, three if I can. You can have one guy squeegeeing it towards a drain, or they have these green machines. You could be vacuuming up the floor and everything, so that tends to help as well.
Also, when you're working, if you drop pans, obviously at that point, if your pan is not on the evap anymore, that water's just going to fall down to the floor, right? So think ahead. If water's going to be rushing, hundreds of gallons of water is going to be on that floor. Make sure your floor drains are clear, right? A lot of people
Yes.
don't think of that. You're just thinking, oh, the floor drain will work. Well, you start pushing all that water into the floor drain, and it's clogged. So now you have 1,000 gallons of water everywhere. It's flooding out to the store. People are, peed off. You don't want that. So just make sure everything is prepped and ready to go before you start doing these cleanings, and your life is going to be so much better if you
That
do
is
that.
that is very correct. So we have a store that has awful floor drain problems. You can't even de-ice a case, but it's good to know that and check those things before you get started, right? So you're all prepped for the cleaning. You got everything ready to go, okay? And you clean that pan, then you're going to start rinsing that coil, okay? And listen, it goes back. You can either do it fast or you can do it correct, okay? This is not a race, all right? Especially if it's been planned with the store. It's not a race. Take your time. You want to make sure it's clean. And then something else I like to do, I know when Justin's out there with guys, they do it as well, is you take all the fan guards off, take those blades off. Those blades are nasty, right? You can take them into a mop sink or something, fill it up with some cleaner, let them soak while you're washing. That makes a huge difference, right? Get all those clean
Now,
because go ahead.
it
Go ahead.
depends on which customer, right? Because the customer I mainly work at, there's really no written rule whether or not you can use cleaner or not. But then there's another vendor or another person that we work at, right? Another store that we work at, and they don't let us use cleaner, right? They just want water. So what we do, we strip those whole evaporators clean, pans, fan blades, fan guards, sometimes even the motors, depending, and to get all the dirt off of them. It really depends per store. But we'll strip them clean and get all that dirt, because you'd be surprised how much dirt gets caked on those, and you just got to soak them, like you're saying, just get it all off of there.
Absolutely. And a little thing to check, right? If you're unplugging motors on the Heatcraft evaporators, they plug in at the bottom and there's zip ties on them. Okay. A lot of times you clip those zip ties. Don't be the guy, which we've all done. You clip a zip tie, you forget about it after you clean, that zip tie will clog up that drain, right? So just a little hack to keep an eye on that. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to get a call back for something like that because that is no fun. So But that'd be how to prep and wash the coils, right? And like I say, when you put it back together, there's two ways to put it back together: correct or fast, right? You don't want to be that guy who gets called back because it's rattling with one or two screws that are missing or a blade loose or something like that. Check operation, watch it, make sure nothing's hitting. Yes.
And another thing, when you're done, okay, what he's saying, check everything. The most common thing that I find after a cleaning is the unions for the drain lines, right?
Yes. Make
There's
sure
a
they're
copper
tight.
union from the drain line trap to the actual drain line on the evap, right? And those unions, you screw them together, right? Make sure that those are all tight, because if someone's not paying attention, someone might just hand tighten it and you're not taking two wrenches, and then 2 days later, a day later after you did the cleaning, there's a service call for water leaking on the floor because someone didn't tighten that union up.
Absolutely.
So definitely take your time.
Yeah, and then like the dairy cooler, most of them are front discharge evaps, but in produce coolers there's low profile evaps. They have unions as well. They don't have traps, but man, you got to make sure all those fans are lined up, because man, what'll happen is it'll run for about 15 minutes and it'll start, and then it sounds like it's going to take off. So be sure when you're checking that. Right now, for instance, in a produce cooler with a low profile evap, there's a little more there. A lot of times it's over the middle, so you only have to have them pull on the sides, just little sections.
Yeah.
And that one works better. Now we're going to switch to the other people we do work for. They have shop in dairy coolers, shop in produce coolers, right? So we do those at night, and it's all in planning, right? Nobody likes to pull stuff, but if you plan far enough ahead, the stores love communication. So literally, I have them pull the whole produce cooler, like all of it, because it's 6 low profile evaps. And produce coolers, they don't get cardboard, but they get like growth on there, and it's nasty.
Clayton's talking about big box stores where you physically walk in there with
Shop
your shopping
in.
cart and you're buying the stuff.
Yes.
Right.
So
That's
we
what he's talking about. Shop in.
we have them pull the whole box, and we just get it all clean, right? And listen, the worst they could say is no, but I always ask, and you'll be surprised if you just ask. Most 9 out of 10 times they'll be like, yeah, we'll pull it. You just let us know a night, and you give them a time, and they'll work with you. You know what I'm saying? So just make sure you're taking the proper steps. Don't just go in there willy-nilly and start spraying like a madman, because you're going to get product loss. People are going to get upset with you, and they're going to remember that time you went in there and cleaned like an animal, and the time you need something from them, it's not going to happen. So just want to make sure you're doing your proper prep work, and make sure when you're putting it back together, those unions have gotten everybody, and they will. And if you say you haven't done it, you're lying. So be sure, tighten those. And listen, if it makes you feel better, throw some Teflon tape on those unions.
Yeah,
that's not going to hurt.
Some of them you have to Teflon.
Yep. It's not going to hurt anything. Not going to hurt anything. So now we're going to talk about drain line replacement and insulation and drain line heaters now. Sometimes they're in coolers. 9 out of 10 times it's just freezers that they're in. So we'll let Justin lead off that one.
So here's a story about a drain line heater. So this was when I was newer in grocery store refrigeration. Normally, when your drain line heater goes bad in a freezer, it's going to cause a blowout on your copper drain line, right? When you are sending water down a drain line in a freezer, and obviously your box is below freezing, it's going to freeze that water unless you have a method to keep that water above freezing. So that's what your drain line heater is for. If your drain line heater dies, your water is going to freeze, expand, and blow your pipe out. So we were at a store in Gainesville, Florida, and it actually ended up being that we had leaks all down this 40-foot plus drain line. We only thought we had a handful. Well, as we were fixing them, we were patching all of the cracks and the breaks in the line. We just found more and more and more and more. So when it comes to a broken drain line due to a bad drain line heater, now I've gotten wise. If you have one break, fine. Anything more than the whole, you're going to want.
And
So just make sure that when you find multiple breaks on a drain line that you just go ahead and replace the whole drain line, because we didn't. We thought that we could fix this whole 40-foot line, and it didn't happen. We found 20 plus breaks in this line, and it really just it's more of a nuisance to the customer for you at that point to be spending your time trying to fix all these leaks rather than just run a whole new drain line. They get a whole new drain line, because when you replace that drain line heater, you have to take all the insulation off anyway. So you're already there. Why not just run a whole new drain line at that point?
Absolutely.
That's just my experience. I'm
No,
sure it's
and
happened to you too, Clayton.
Oh man, all the time. I've had plenty of times down in Winter Haven when I was younger. I'd pull the whole thing out, have it all out, strut out on the floor and repairing it, and then what? So here's the thing. 9 out of 10 times you're going to come across these. There's already going to be this chunk of ice, right? Like this iceberg in there anyways, right? It sucks that it's there. But what's 2 more days of it being there if you can replace the whole entire drain line, right? And listen, if you're going to ride the drain line, do the drain line, right up the heater and the insulation. Okay. And also a little hack that a guy taught me, Stacy taught me this a long time ago. If you have a 7/8 drain line, put 1.125 insulation on there. That way it goes right around the heater and everything for that drain line. Right. Oh man, listen, I've been there trying to squeeze that drain, trying to squeeze that insulation around there, and you just can't get it, man. It'll drive you crazy.
Sorry, I was muted. I was just saying upsize it. Upsize it every time.
Upsize it.
If you have a 7/8 line, we normally do 1.125 by 1 inch wall. That's normally what we do, and it's worked great up until now. Now, when you are doing your drain line heater, don't do it live. Just don't. Don't do it live. No. A lot of people, you're going to be at a lot of stores, and it is a lot of the time very hard to find the 120 breaker for that drain line heater. It could be on a shared breaker. It could be on its own breaker. I did one live one time, and it blew up in my face because we actually had a bad connection on the drain line heater that we just installed, and it went right in my face. So make sure when you're putting it in, kill the power, put the drain line heater in, wire it in, test it then.
And something to be known, Justin said something earlier. All you have to do is keep that water above freezing, okay? I used to think when I was younger, they got to be super hot. I have found a lot Grainger sells like 41 degree, 43 degree heaters. That's all they got to be. All the water's got to be is above freezing, but it's a mind thing. So just know, as long as it's above freezing, sure, I want it to be 90 degrees as well. I don't want any ice, but ice is not going to form at 41 degrees, so just be mindful that it's going to sell like that. But just make sure you're checking all that stuff. And when you ride it up for a new union, just do it, because they're cheap copper unions. If you're going to go that far in, man, don't leave the old union. Just write up a brand new one if you can.
And it depends. I mean, you can. So when you're doing a drain line heater, a lot of the time you'll see them snake it in a circle around the whole drain line. And that's not bad. If you want to do that, that's fine. It's just going to use more of the heat tape, right? It's going to use more of your drain line heater. But realistically, if you think about it, you only have water draining. It's a low pressure line, right? So the water is going to be at the bottom of the pipe. If the pipe is here, the water is going to be here at the bottom, right? So all you need to do is just tape that drain line heater at the bottom of your pipe, because that's where your water is going to be.
Yep.
And that's just the easiest way.
Absolutely. So, and then now what we're going to move on to is doors. Checking the doors, checking the door gaskets. Okay. These are 2 things, man. They're very vital. You show up to a store, there is other issues, but the door ain't closing. You need to check adjustment on that thing. Okay. For instance, I'll let Justin explain the Regent door they had down in Newport Richey, what we ended up having to do because of the design of the door.
So on doors that are hinged, right? So if it's a hinged door, like a door in your house, right? It's on hinges. That door needs to be perfectly square and or plumb, right? For that door to seal properly. If the door is any way not plumb to the wall, then you're going to have an air gap on that door, right? And at that point, really the only thing you could do is either get a new door or you can actually take some foam tape and or some window sealer, stick it to the door frame to fill that gap in between the door and the door frame, right? You can do that to seal it up. Is it a perfect fix? Not really. But with your rail doors, your sliding doors on a rail, those are actually adjustable forward or backward, right? To be able to move that door closer or further away from your door frame. But on hinged doors, it's very vital that they're like perfectly set up on there, because if there's any air gap, it's going to ice it up.
And the one that he was working on in particular, that one's a real pain, because where the door latch is so low on the door, because it's a huge door. It's 6x9 door. If you really put it in the middle, man, it'd be like 5.5 feet tall for the latch.
Yeah,
it's not going to work.
And people aren't going to be able to do that.
So it's so low, it puts the door in a bind where it holds out. So he put the gaskets there, and like I say, it's not a perfect fix. But here's the thing: what works in a air-conditioned factory somewhere at the factory is not always what works in a 22-year-old store or a 10-year-old store, or vice versa. So just something to be mind. Yeah, we're in the field. Yeah, real life stuff. And the slider doors aren't bad. They have some, all of them are a little different. They got adjustment screws on the top. You can slide them in and out and up and down. Just make sure. Now, also on the slider doors, you need to make sure when you're shutting the door, it's not so close. Justin had one, he had to readjust a brand new one installed at a store in Hudson, where it literally, you could see where the rubber had literally marked up the thing, because it was so you just adjust it, make sure it falls into place, and it seals, you know.
Because there is, if you guys don't know, on that track, if you really look, there's a groove, right? So when the door seals, it's actually going to slide into that groove, and it's going to pull the door closer at the end, right?
Yes.
Now, when you open the door up, it's going to pull the door further away from the door frame to let it slide. So you want to make sure when it's sliding, it's not dragging your door gasket.
There you go.
Right? And vice versa. When you're closing, you want to make sure it's closed enough. You have to find a happy medium between open enough and closed enough where you're not dragging, but you're not having this huge gap, right, to let air in.
Absolutely. And on the swing, we'll go back to the swinging doors. If you need to write up hinges, listen, man, at all cost, if you have an opportunity, write up all 3 hinges or 4 hinges or 2 hinges. Don't just write up one. Man, there may be some customer out there who's like, I'm only doing 1. Listen, if you got 3 hinges, one of them's bad, I always like to write up all 3, change all 3, save the 2 used ones, throw them in the rack house, right? Keep them as extra for an emergency, right? Because you always want to have, just all 3 brand new hinges if they're going to approve it, right? And then another set of doors. The customer we've done work for a while and have a service contract, they use HCR doors. And then another customer just started doing them all, right? These HCR doors, you open the door, it can be a slider, it can be a swing door. You open it and it's got 2 sets of strip curtains, okay, like this, right? Set for the store side and a set for the freezer side, okay?
It's and the vestibule in between the outside and the inside of your freezer.
Yep.
That's all it is.
Exactly. And it's got blowers. It's got a fan that blows air across. There's vents in there, and it's got heaters, okay? So something very important. All those strip curtains are 100% overlap. And they're not dragging the ground, so they're not gapping out, okay? We'll have to do another video diving into the specifics of HCR, but the strip curtains have to be right, and they have to be touching the ground, and they can't be missing. But these HCR doors do work great as long as they are set up right. And whether the curtains are 12-inch wide or 8-inch wide doesn't really matter. As long as they're not dragging the ground. Yeah, and they're overlapped properly. And one thing, because I don't want to that could be a whole nother video in itself. Check. Make sure the store doesn't have the inside one propped up, as they do. So just
always.
Yes. So
we'll countless service calls where you show up to a store for a freezer running slightly warm. So say it's like a -5 set point and it's running +4. Well, either the strip curtains on the inside of your freezer are jacked up, or they just have them, pushed over to the side. So now your HCR door is just heating your freezer up consistently.
Yep. Absolutely. So while we're on the subject that, we're going to talk about strip curtains. Okay. This is a big one. Okay. How to install strip curtains. Strip curtains can be done 2 ways: fast or correct, right? Fast or correct, right? And when you're doing strip curtains, don't ever cheap out. don't ever order just enough, right? So the thing I like to do whenever Justin or whoever, or even if I find strip curtains, I write it up for a 6x9 door at the one customer, no matter what, because you can always trim curtains up. Haven't found a good way of adding on to curtains. You know what I'm saying?
No.
So, so always write them up a 6x9, and I personally always write them up for 100% overlap. So you could do one whole row, and then you can do a 50% overlap. Then you got extra, right? Because here's the truth of the matter: they're leaving the door open, and if they
Yeah,
tell you they're not, they're lying to
they're
you.
lying.
So the only thing that you are 10 minutes. The only thing that you're going to have be able to do is put up strip curtains and put up extra ones, right? And I know Justin's done plenty of sets of strip curtains. He could talk about that, how he hangs those up and
So
everything.
when you guys are doing strip curtains, we've seen a lot of hackers put them in. And on a medium temp, you don't need to 100% overlap strip curtains, right? 50% just fine, right? They just need to be there. But don't put them this far off the ground. A foot and a half from the floor is not going to work, right? That kind of negates the whole purpose of strip curtains.
Yes.
Obviously, they can't be dragging against the ground, right? I'll give you 3 inches. 3 inches is fine. But
Yep.
if we're a foot and a half off the ground, it's not going to work. And we found how many at this one chain that we work at where they're putting in these very low quality strip curtains to begin with that already rip and tear within months of being up.
Yes.
And then not only that, but they're very far from the ground, over a foot from the ground.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So just make sure you got strip curtains on there. Okay. That is cheap insurance. All right. Cheap insurance. And the good news is once you get those, they have a new, and everybody's got their own flavor bracket. You got the bracket and it has like this, this hook that's like this, right?
DRS makes a really good one.
Yeah. DRS, Pro Gasket, whoever you use. Once you get the good brackets up, the good news is you ain't got to replace, you could just buy rolls of curtains and replace them. So, and then the next thing, my personal favorite is door alarms. Okay. Because back when I was younger, door alarms weren't a thing, man. I would have to sit there. My dad would call, be like, well, you got to call whoever and make sure it's out of tent before we can close the call. I'd sit there and guard the door, you know, like a terrible person, be like, get away, just keep stepping. Okay. Freezer's got 3 more degrees. So now we have approval. We put door alarms on. Okay. Every chance we get. All right. And we do it at the store that we do service contracts at, and we do it at the other store we just do a lot of reactive calls at. And Justin will tell you there's nothing more satisfying than putting a door alarm on. Muted.
Sorry. So one of the chains that we work at, there's this area called online grocery pickup, right? And this is at several chains, but they're notorious for just leaving the door open, going in and getting their stuff, and that door will be open all day, like 6, 7, 8 hours. That door will be open, right? Freezer or cooler, it doesn't matter. There was one evaporator in this freezer for online grocery pickup. It was so iced over that the fans stopped moving. And this is on a freezer, not extremely common for ice to be all the way through. Like the whole entire evap was just filled with ice because they had that door open so long. And it will actually bow your floors up too, because water's going to drip down below your floors and it's going to freeze and it's going to pop your floors up. So why we put door alarms is not only to reduce calls on our end, but also to keep that freezer or cooler at temp. Because if they keep that door open for 5 minutes, that's not the end of the world. But if we're keeping the door open for 5 hours, would you leave your fridge door open or your freezer door open at your house for 5 hours?
Oh man, how many times I've said that. Yeah. And you know, listen, the jury's out at what the best time to set the door alarm is. We usually, listen, if it is a nuisance thing, we start at 30 seconds. Okay.
Yep.
Because here's the thing, if you give them 5 minutes, they're going to keep it open for 5 minutes. If you give them 10 minutes, they're going to keep it open for 10 minutes. So every time. So, and here's the thing. And now once the HCR gets installed, you can like extend that time a little bit, but still just remember, they're like children. They're going to go all the way to the very edge. They're adult children buying groceries for people.
And they're going to put magnets on the sensor. So the way door alarms work is you have a magnet on your door and a sensor mounted to the wall. So when your door closes, that magnet closes the relay on your sensor, right? That's the way it works. So they'll take magnets on like a stick and they'll just stick them to the wall. Which is why, if you can, try to put that magnet and sensor out of reach. So they really have to go out of their way if they really wanted to do it. Because we found so many times you go to a store, how is this freezer this iced up? We have a door alarm on there. And then you look and you're like, oh, they
There's
put a magnet
Yep.
on the door alarm.
So
take pictures of that, let management know, because management doesn't want you out there de-icing all the time either. And if they already paid money for a door alarm, you have to make sure that it's working, because they do reduce calls. We were getting, at one store alone, we were getting iced up calls probably 3 times a month. As soon as we put a door alarm on there, we've gotten 1 cent.
Yeah.
1.
Which, because they jumped the door alarm out, but it took, you know what I mean? They had to put effort into it. And, you know, and also I don't want to get into defrost because I don't want to short ourselves on defrost. I think that's a full episode there. So yeah, a whole other episode. But we, you know, listen, with these walk-in things, that the key here is don't rush through when you're doing these calls for these walk-ins. Take your time. Take your time for the cleaning. Take your time for the strip curtains. Take your time for the door alarms. Just take your time, right? There is times when you are going to get pressured for calls and all this, but I try never, and Justin can attest this, I try to not rush people around, because I have been before, and you can only do so much, you know. So just take your time, and if you do it right, listen, if you have time to rush through, you have time to come back, right?
At the end of the day, guys, if they were okay with letting their cooler get that dirty for 5 years, they can let you clean it for 5 hours. You know?
Absolutely.
They did it to themselves. So don't feel bad because you're in there and it's a nuisance to them because now they can't get in and out. It is what it is, guys. It's part of life. They need to get their stuff cleaned. So don't let them just push you around. Just do your thing. Don't rush. Get the job done 100%, and then you won't have to do the job to that extent again for quite some time, hopefully.
Absolutely. And one thing I always say, if somebody's, and I try to deal with this for everybody, that way the guys don't have to deal with this. If they're going to call and say, how dare you clean the coils, I'll take that call every day. How dare you take your time and clean them properly? Then call me, you know? So,
right.
But, well, thank you guys very much. We appreciate it. But you got anything you want to add before we go, Justin?
No, just take your time. A lot of the stuff that you're going to find in walk-ins is really just either stuff employees jacked up or something very simple that failed. Walk-ins are normally going to be your lowest call volume call out there, really, like, unless it's an iced up issue. Most of the time, walk-ins are going to be the most smooth sailing pieces of equipment in a store. So as long as you keep them properly cleaned and make sure that those doors stay shut, you're really not going to have many issues, because customers aren't the people touching those. It's only employees. So the failure percentage is way lower than, say, another case. So just take your time, make sure you clean them, make sure your doors are sealing, and just make sure that your box is in good shape. There's no air penetration, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys very much. We'll do another episode next week. Probably talk about defrost, because I don't want to just rush through that. There's a lot to be said about that.
There's a lot to defrost. So thank you guys for watching. We'll be back at it next week.
All right. Thank you.